Welcome back to the third episode of Cardinal Territory. I'm Katie Wu. He's Trevor Rosenthal. We officially survived 1 week of the show. Trevor, how are you feeling?
I am doing great, Katie. It's Christmas time. How are you?
It is Christmas time. I'm back in California visiting my family. I'm a last minute everything kind of person. It's why I'm a reporter. I'll write on deadline. It's my best work. And I have that same energy for Christmas shopping. So I have been putting in work the last 2 days. And I have one more round. I'm going to knock it out right after this. And then I will actually feel like it'll be a festive time. My heart goes out to the baseball reporters who have had to deal with an insane weekend. A ton of moves were made just off the top of my head. Jesus Luzardo goes to Philadelphia. That rotation is going to be nasty. Sean Manaea back to the Mets. Jock Peterson is a Ranger. We can go on and on. Walker Buehler goes to the Red Sox. And then, of course, the very sad news that the Hall of Famer and all-time great Rickey Henderson passed away over the weekend. So that was all very sad. But some big news in Cardinals land as well. Paul Goldschmidt, he's going to be in pinstripes. Reports on Saturday said that Goldy signed a 1-year, $12.5 million contract with the New York Yankees, effectively ending his time in St. Louis. Trevor, what are your thoughts on the Goldschmidt deal and then the Goldschmidt era here in St. Louis?
Yeah, as a Cardinal fan, I think you have to be very satisfied and happy with the time that Goldy was doning the birds on the bat. Really seemed to get him, maybe not his prime, but kind of like the tailwind of a prime for arguably a Hall of Fame player and certainly a Hall of Fame individual. Everything that I've heard from teammates of Goldy is that he's an incredible person, but his numbers really speak for it. Being he was an all-star in 22, and he really put together some solid years in St. Louis. So I think as a Cardinal fan, I'm happy the time that we got to enjoy Paul, and then you have to be happy too. Guy going to the Yankees. Granted, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but as a player, you always hold a certain amount of respect for the New York Yankees, very similar to the St. Louis Cardinals too. Very successful organization. So, I'm happy for Paul to go out and continue his career and have another opportunity to do that in a winning organization, a winning environment. So super happy for him. Obviously, this is where he wanted to go, right? Like the ball is kind of in your court when you put together a career like Paul Goldschmidt has. I'm sure there was a lot of people coming knocking on his door this offseason, and it makes a lot of sense for him to go from one, perennial playoff organization and pennant race team to another. So happy for Paul. What do you think, Katie? What do you think about Paul? You got to work with him the last few years.
Yeah, and it's always sad because you cover players and you have this, the professional boundary, of course, but Goldschmidt from day one was nothing but a total pro. And to have him for, when I first started covering the Cardinals in 21, he'd already been there for a couple of years. And he just had so much, he made me want to do my job really well. Like whether he realized it or not, talking to Goldschmidt helped me become a better reporter, especially early on when I really was kind of spiraling and was like, are we sure I'm doing this right? Just such a respected figure in that clubhouse. And we talk about it a lot, how he's not a vocal leader, but he didn't have to be, Trevor, right? Like this is a guy, when you think back throughout his Cardinals tenure, 4 postseason appearances, a Gold Glove in 2021, the MVP in 2022. And, what I'll remember most is not the accolades he did on the field, but how he treated others off of it. Him and his wife, Amy, were so charitable and generous with their time, not just in St. Louis, but throughout baseball. And I think when you look towards the youth movement for the Cardinals next year, there is so much to be excited about. But then you miss that veteran presence, right? You miss that this is a guy who, at 37 years old, is just now completed his first ever run in free agency. Like that's crazy. He's been in the game for, he was someone that I watched growing up in high school, right? Like I would turn on the National League West growing up on the West Coast, and there'd be Goldy in a Diamondbacks uniform, and he just really liked to watch him. So on a personal note, nothing but respect for Goldschmidt. I wish him all the best in New York. It will be very strange to see him without a beard. Maybe he'll resemble more like his rookie years. We have like a photoshopped thing that we'll put on as our thumbnail on YouTube. And I was looking at him photoshopped in pinstripes without a beard, and I was like, okay, looks a little weird, but he'll be
He's
fine.
turning back the clock.
Exactly. Maybe, and then I'm sure he's hoping that his numbers in 25 will resemble more of what they did in 2022, 2019, etc. So yeah, for the Cardinals, really not much of a surprise if you're a Cardinals fan. They told Goldschmidt at the very end of the season, "Hey, look, this is the direction we're going. Is about the kids, and we're going to start trimming payroll." And I firmly believe, this is my speculation, that if this was not the direction the Cardinals were going, that they would have extended him. But unfortunately, they're taking a step back. They're focusing on their internal talent, and there just wasn't a logical piece for Goldschmidt in the future. And it was all but cemented at the GM meetings when John Mozeliak came out and said Willson Contreras will be playing first base. So I am interested to see how Goldschmidt does in New York. He's, again, 37 years old and coming off what he would say is the worst professional year of his career. But there are some things to be excited about if you're a Yankees fan. I think he'll be a prime bounce back candidate. You never know. And when Paul Goldschmidt is really locked in, when he's hitting the ball well, he's driving that ball to right center, right field. Can I get a short porch? Maybe this will be something that really benefits him. And I hope it did. I hope it is.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think about this, and you brought it up, and it really hits the nail on the head. A guy like Paul Goldschmidt, even for you, Katie, you said he had that impact on you where it's like, I want to do my job better because I see someone else that just shows up every day with a level of excellence. And this is something, I mean, the Cardinals have to be cognizant of. I mean, we talked about it last week when I was on the show, but I was the result of so many players like Goldschmidt. Granted, their names were Wainwright and Carpenter and Molina and Holiday, but that does have an effect on your young players, that certain type of veteran presence. And even though, in a year like last year, a veteran player that has a down year, it's hard to really quantify the effect that he had on those players outside of the field. So, I hope they're, keen to that. And they're not losing sight of the type of player these veterans are, and the experience and that level of excellence that it brings. It impacts an entire organization. And especially during spring training, when you do have those young guys showing up, it's a lot of these new draft picks. It's going to be their first time in a major league clubhouse. So who are we putting around them? Who's going to set the example of how to be a professional, of how to show up and do the work every single day? So, you're right. The Yankees they should be excited. The Yankee fan base should be excited to get a player like Paul Goldschmidt, and, happy for him to continue that legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. And I'm not sure how the Goldschmidt era will be remembered in St. Louis. I hope it'll be remembered fondly. But, one of the last conversations we had in 2024, he spoke about the last 4 years where kind of the Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado era really took force. And come early 2021, people were so excited about it. And you fast forward 4 years later, they played in just three playoff games and didn't win a single one. And Goldschmidt was so candid about his times in St. Louis, how much he really enjoyed playing here, how much he loved the fan base. He loves the heavy expectations. And this is something well. That city expects you to win. That city expects you to play well. When he wasn't playing well in 2024, fans let him hear it. And he never once shied away from it. But I thought it was so revealing. He told me that, ironically, probably his most disappointing season was his best personal season in 2022, right? He wins the National League MVP. He is just absolute must-watch baseball for most of the season. The Cardinals, in my opinion, looked like they were going to make a deep run in 2022. And then this very ill-fated ninth inning, 2 outs away, game 1 against the Phillies in the wild card series. Cardinals fans don't need to hear me rehash this. Just kind of derailed everything. So to hear him kind of speak to his disappointment and to call 2022 his most disappointing year, I thought that said a lot. And I think that kind of sums up the Goldschmidt era. It's complicated, right? Like there were so many good memories. There was so much good baseball. But at the end of the day, both him and Nolan fell short of their expectations here. And it's just it's hard to fathom, what that corner infield looks like and what it will look like without them.
Oh my goodness. I mean, not easy guys to replace, certainly. Paul Goldschmidt, and then, we were talking about it last week, the possibility of a guy like Nolan Arenado not being in the infield any longer either. So, we know the talent is one thing, but the experience is a whole other thing. So, yeah, it's gonna be some big shoes to fill for whoever the Cardinals have in mind.
Well, perfect segue. You're on it. Let's talk about what the Cardinals infield will look like next year. So we know about half of it, right? Mason Wynn, he's not going anywhere. He'll be that shortstop, the majority of the time. Willson Contreras will be playing first base and DH, which is not something I saw coming, right? I always thought that when you signed a 5-year, $87 million contract to be a starting catcher, you would last more than 2 years. But I understand what the Cardinals are doing here. I think it's smart given the direction that they're suddenly pivoting to, right? You want to create playing time for Ivan Herrera, Pedro Pajes. Put Contreras at first. You keep his bat in the lineup. He was always a bat first player, and he did a lot of work behind the scenes to improve over the last 2 years behind the plate. It's not his fault, of course, that he was injured for half of the 2024 season. But I like Contreras at first base. We'll see where he is defensively. He told me the other day he's going to win a Gold Glove there, so I love that energy. But we have kind of 2 question marks, right? Mason Wynn at shortstop, Willson Contreras at first. On the off chances he DHs, you'll probably see Alec Burleson step in there. But we don't know what third base is going to look like. And because of that, we don't know what second base is going to look like. So let's go through 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, Nolan Arenado is traded, right? That opens the door for Nolan Gorman, who came up through the Cardinal system as third baseman, to get significant reps at the hot corner. Brendan Donovan, he can play anywhere. So you could see him at third. You can see him at second. You can see even Thomas Sajaci, should he make the opening day roster, kind of bounce around. The Cardinals like those roving utility guys. You know this. Then there's scenario number 2, where they don't trade Arenado. So he's at third. You still have Mason at short. Do you keep Gorman at second? Do you move Brendan Donovan and keep him in that super utility role? Does Donovan take over at second and then Gorman becomes a DH? It's kind of messy, and that's okay. It's supposed to be. It's December. They don't need to have the roster all the way finalized. But I'm wondering what that infield looks like if Nolan stays. And could it, could the Cardinals surprise some people if Arenado remains with the organization?
I mean, I think that's the situation we would all hope for as a Cardinals fan is having Arenado in the mix definitely brings gets rid of a lot of the question marks and brings some certainty to an infield that really only has one guy, Mason Wynn, that's has been there and done it, and you know that he's experienced at the position. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Willson Contreras. He's a phenomenal athlete and a great competitor, and I mean, I haven't seen a guy that works as hard as Willson Contreras. It was impressive to see how fast he came back from the hand injury that he had as well. I just wanted to mention that, but it's hard to speculate on what happens with Arenado. We've already seen how difficult it can be to get him shipped off. I mean, trades are hard to execute on to begin with, but then when a guy makes in a no trade clause and he has certain preferences, obviously it's going to make it difficult because not only do the Cardinals have to have something lined up that they think is beneficial, but they also have to pass it through through Arenado and make sure that he's on board. So I would like to see, as if I'm a Cardinals fan, if I'm in the front office, seeing Arenado walk through the door in spring training makes me feel a lot better about the situation. But at the same time, hopefully we have some surprises. Hopefully there's a breakout year for somebody in there and they can show up and surprise us all and really take over of that opportunity. I know if I was a third baseman or an infielder headed into spring training this year, I'm doing everything I can to take advantage because I know the door is wide open on multiple areas in the infield. And if obviously offense is very important, if I can show that I'm ready day one, opportunities are going to be there. So that has to be exciting for young players coming in, if this is their first or second or spring training or first opportunity to make a big league roster. Exciting times as a player for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of those players that they're really counting on, and we've talked about this before, is Nolan Gorman. I mean, John Mozeliak told me during the winter meetings they'd like to see Gorman get between 500 to 600 plate appearances. They want him playing every day. It's just, where is he going to be playing? And they don't know that unless they know what they're going to do with Nolan. And it's, I'm torn, right? And because we talk about Goldschmidt, I feel the same way about Arenado, someone who, I want to be better at my job. He's been nothing but good in my 4 years here to me. And I can see where the Cardinals, obviously, if your goal is to win games, you win games by having a Hall of Famer at third base on your roster hitting cleanup every day. That would certainly help. But are you also blocking players. Like, how can you create opportunities for Gorman and Donovan and Sajaci and go on and on and on, Burleson? If you have someone, because if Arenado stays, he's playing every day, right? He's not going to sit the bench. That's not how this works. So that to me is the most fascinating thing. And here's the thing, Trevor, is I actually I don't know if Nolan Arenado is going to be traded. I don't know. And I have a different answer every week. So I feel like whether it's a radio show or something, a podcast, the biggest question is what are the odds Nolan gets traded? I don't know. I don't know anymore. It's so confusing. I'm back to 50-50. I was like 60-40 one week. I was even 80-20 that he was going to go in the beginning of December. But now we're back to 50-50. We'll recap the last week of Astros drama. Cardinals had a deal in place to send Nolan Arenado to Houston. Nolan said, hey, not right now. Didn't feel like the timing was right, but we'll keep in contact. The Astros said, hey, I understand. No hard feelings, but we have to pivot for what's best for us. So a couple days later, they go out and they sign Christian Walker to a 3-year, $60 million deal, all but ensuring Nolan will not be an Astro after all. So two teams remain pretty, in the mix with their interests kind of varying. The Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees continue to check in. Those are teams that have been pretty busy, obviously. They had some big signings, Goldy to New York and Walker Buehler to the Red Sox Monday morning. But as we've seen, trades are complicated. As you've said, trades are complicated. If Nolan isn't traded, this will impact the Cardinals offseason in terms of who else they're willing to trade because of that. So let's say we get to mid-January. The players want to know where they're going to be, right? Like in your perspective, if you don't have a home per se by mid-January, pitchers and catchers are just a few weeks away. What does that do to a player?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you definitely like to have the ability to plan and get everything set up and go into the season and have a level of comfort. But when I look at Arenado's situation, he's aware of what's going on, and I would say in his eyes, he's planning on being somewhere other than St. Louis with all just the talk and speculation. And obviously there's already been offers that have come in that he's turned down. And because he's turned down that offer, I mean, whether there's a list or not, or whether he has preferences on where he would like to be, he's thinking about it. And he's thinking, I'm going to be somewhere where a team is excited to have me and they're bringing me in for a specific purpose. And, contrary to what the St. Louis Cardinals have expressed as their plans, they plan on being a contender. They want to win. They're not completely throwing in the towel, but they're not in the same position as the Mets or the Yankees or the Dodgers who are going all in. And, for me, if I'm Nolan Arenado, or kind of what I think is going on in his mind is he's planning on being somewhere else. And so if I'm him, I'm excited. I'm keeping myself ready. And if it doesn't happen in January, maybe the season gets started. Maybe we get through spring training. Maybe it's April, May. I know there's me doing well and performing well is going to help my value. And it's going to encourage that team that is really looking for help at third base to make that move and make it enticing enough for St. Louis to come on board. And then, it seems that Arenado has some destination in mind, whether it's the West Coast or the East Coast. I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, we've heard about a list, whether there's a specific list or not, I'm not sure. But it seems like he's anticipating moving on from St. Louis at some point soon.
Yeah, I would agree, because these kind of negotiations don't take place publicly if both parties aren't motivated to strike a deal. And Mo has said that. What I found interesting about this is deals like this happen all the time. Situations like this where an organization approaches another one with a potential trade, they agree to it, something falls through, and then teams pivot. This coming out so publicly, I think was very interesting for fans to see, because this happens all of the time. Usually it just isn't out there for the public to follow every step of the way. But when Mo came out and said, we certainly intend to try to move Nolan and that would be best for both parties, I think that backs up exactly what you just said. But there is a reality where that doesn't happen. Now, if the Cardinals come up to, middle of February and Nolan's at third base, they still want to trim payroll, so that could impact players like Eric Fetty, Steven Matz. The most logical thing, and this is what I've heard as well, is if the Cardinals can't trade Nolan, they still have to shed some payroll, so that would most likely come from the rotation. Miles Michaelis and Sonny Gray, they make the most money, but they also have full no trade clauses. Steven Matz makes about $12 million next year. Eric Fetty, $7.5. Given those prices, because starting pitching is like astronomically expensive, as always. They would be very easy trade candidates and an easy way for the Cardinals to trim payroll. It's just not what they want to do. They want to keep Eric Fetty at least, and they'll look for Mats, but their primary like plan A was to move Nolan. So if they don't end up doing that, like things can change, right? It's December 23rd. We still got about 6-7 weeks before spring training officially starts. Things can change. But if they don't trade Nolan and they have to move it to starting pitching, I'm interested to see how that whole like domino effect happens without the organization. Like who would step up internally? Are we going to see, we know we're going to see Andre Palante. Are we going to see more Mike McGreevy? Can some of these top pitching prospects like Tink Hence, Quinn Matthews, can they make a jump? We'll see. But it's also connected. And the reason we've been talking about Nolan over this entire offseason is because it really is the Cardinals' most pressing needs. So I expect that conversation to continue into January. And hey, you know what? If he's not traded come pitchers and catchers, he's coming off what he would say is his worst year of his career. He's motivated, he could play himself out, or maybe he figures out like, hey, I can tough this out and I want to be here and the Cardinals win some games. So we'll see. Not the worst thing in the world either way, but certainly a compelling storyline nonetheless.
Yeah. Not a bad situation either way. I mean, he was excited to come to St. Louis from Colorado, and I'm sure he's happy there. I'm sure he wished that there was some more playoff games that he had an opportunity to win, like we talked about with Goldschmidt. But no, he'll be happy, and it will be interesting. One thing I think for all the players that you mentioned involved is everybody's wondering, am I going to be here? Is this an opportunity for me to go somewhere else? I better show up. I better do well. And when you have players thinking that way, I mean, it's good for the Cardinals too. Everybody's wants the best for themselves, and in turn, that works out well for the organization. But the other thing I've seen too with St. Louis, and even with my time in St. Louis, is you wonder the front office and how they view the assets that they own. Do they overvalue them sometimes? Are they expecting maybe more in return? And that's what causes these roadblocks and causes these deals to ultimately not get done. Should they be more realistic? I don't know. I haven't been in that room. I don't see the behind the scenes. But I know from the clubhouse sometimes it's obvious or seems to be obvious that a player should be moved at a certain point in time and they end up not being moved. And then that window closes and you're kind of stuck with them at that point. And so, in the rebuilding year or a pivot sort of year, I'm not sure how we're categorizing it, but I think
there's so many different ways.
There's so many different ways to spin it, but you would hope with a guy like Arenado, a guy like Mats, Fetty, whoever it may be, that you don't put too much value on that asset and miss out on an opportunity to bring in some players that could have an impact for the future of the organization.
Yes, and Cardinals fans are familiar with players that the organization perhaps kept too long. Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Carlson, the list goes on and on. But hey, that's in the past, and we are looking towards the future on this podcast. We are looking forward to 2025, which will be here sooner than we think. But first, we'll celebrate the holidays. So that's a wrap for episode 3. You can follow us on X, Twitter, whatever. I'll never call it X, whatever. @Card Territory. You can like and subscribe to our page on YouTube. Find us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And most importantly, a very happy holidays from Trevor and myself. We're so happy that you have joined us for this podcast, and we hope you continue to. Trevor, what you got? Sign us off.
Hey, Merry Christmas, Katie. What an exciting time to reign in the new year. CT, I mean, this is my gift, right? This is the gift that I got for Christmas this year. A new show with Miss Katie Woo and Cardinal Territory, a spinoff of the Foul Territory Network. I'm excited. Big things to come ahead, and I've enjoyed it very much so far. So yeah, follow along with us. I think this is going to be an exciting time, and hopefully between Katie and myself, obviously we have 2 different backgrounds, but hopefully we can bring an interesting spin on all the action that is going to come and take place over these next few months.
Right, like this is the off season. We're in like the dead period. Just wait till we're like in the dog days, and then we're just off the rails. It can only go up from here. For Trevor, I'm Katie Woo. We will talk to you, Trevor, next week. I'll be with you guys on Friday. Have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We will talk soon.